Okay, welcome. Let us start to discuss about Sir Philip Sidney's poem Loving in Truth. The title of the poem is Loving in Truth. Everybody knows that the first line of a sonnet is generally considered to be the title of a sonnet. So the poem that begins with the line Loving in truth and fain in verse my love to so, and that is why the title of this sonnet is Loving in Truth. I hope that I am clear. Now, everybody must understand that this poem, it's an example of a sonnet, right? It's an example of a sonnet. A sonnet is a poem of 14 lines, usually written in iambic pentameter. I repeat, a sonnet is a poem of 14 lines, usually written in iambic pentameter. But this sonnet is a bit different. Why? Because this sonnet definitely it's a poem of 14 lines, but it is written in iambic hexameter, right? It is written in iambic hexameter. So most of the poems are written in iambic pentameter, but this sonnet, sonnet number 1, sonnet number 1, the title of which is Loving in Truth, it is written in iambic hexameter. That means each line of the poem has 12 syllables, right? The poems which are written in iambic pentameter, these poems have 10 syllables 10 syllables in each line, but this poem, sonnet number 1 or Loving in Truth, it is written in iambic hexameter. It means that each line has 12 syllables, right? This particular poem has been taken from a sonnet sequence, the title of which is Astrophel and Stella, right? The title of which is Astrophel and Stella. Some people call it Astrophil and Stella. Astrophil and Stella. This is the name of the collection, and this is a sonnet sequence. It consists of 108 sonnets. It has 11 songs. I repeat, Astrophil and Stella or Astrophel and Stella. It consists of 108 sonnets. It has 11 songs, right? Now we need to understand the significance of this particular title, Astrophil and Stella. If we look to this word astrophil, we can understand that this word astrophil, it derives from two Greek words. It derives from two Greek words. It derives from two Greek words. What are the two Greek words? The first one is Esther and the second word is phil. The word Esther, it means star, and the word phil, it means love. So astrophil means star lover. A star lover is a person, one who stands on the surface of the earth and is continuously looking to the beauty of the star, is in love with the beauty of the star. But if you can practically look at the scenario, you understand that a star is always unreachable to a star lover, right? Despite the utmost effort given by a star lover or a human being, a star always remains unreachable. A star always remains far away from a star lover. In the same way, if we can look to the life of Sir Philip Sidney, Sir Philip Sidney was in love with the lady Penelope Devereux. He was in love with the lady Penelope Devereux. But Penelope Devereux, she was married to Lord Rich. So the love relationship of Sir Philip Sidney was broken. So we can call that Sir Philip Sidney was like an astrophel and the lady Penelope Devereux was the star, right? We need to understand the meaning of the word stella. It's a Latin word. Believe me, it's a Latin word, and this Latin word in English means a star. So the title Astrophel and Stella, It symbolizes, it emphasizes, it signifies the distance between a lover and his lady love, as the star is always unreachable to a star lover. In the same way, Madame Penelope Diverux was not married to Sir Philip Sidney, she was married to Lord Reach. So this particular title is an indication of the fact that how the lover has been separated from his lady love, right? Now, Astrophel and Stella is the name of a sonnet collection, and this sonnet collection has how many sonnets? It has 108 sonnets, and this sonnet collection has 11 songs, right? This sonnet collection is inspired by the celebrated writer Petrarch. We all know Petrarch and sonnet. Sonnet is of two types, Petrarch and sonnet and English sonnet. Petrarch and sonnet is alternatively called as or called to be the Italian sonnet. And Petrarch, let me tell you all, Petrarch was in love with a lady. Petrarch was in love with a lady, Laura. So he was in love with Laura, but his love relationship with Laura was equally broken. What is the full name of Petrarch? Francis Petrarch. What is the full name of Petrarch? Francis Petrarch. People say Francesco di Petrarco. He was a scholar. He was a scholar. He was a poet of early Renaissance. He was one of the earliest humanists, right? So Petrarch was considered as the founder of sonnet, and Petrarch introduced sonnet in Italy. And a sonnet is a poem of 14 lines, you understood. Now, Francis Petrarch was in love with the lady Laura, but his love relationship was broken. So we understand, we can call that the main subject matter of a Petrarchan sonnet is the theme of unfulfilled love, is the theme of unrequited love, is the theme of separated love, right? So if we can look to the title, or if we can give more emphasis on the title, we understand that in this title also for the case of the central theme of the poem is concerned, we understand that the poem equally deals with the subject matter of separation, the subject matter of the pain of love, the subject matter of the agony of love, right? Now, I have explained that the word astrophil, the word feel, it means love. There are many words, related to feel. For example, bibliophile, it means a lover of, books. For example, philodendron, exactly. So there are many words which are related to feel, and this particular word feel means love. So astrophil means a star lover, and the Latin word stella, it means star, and the title that signifies a kind of a, what I say, a kind of an unfulfilled relationship between the lover and his lady love. Now, if we consider that this poem is basically based on the romantic theme of separation, then we will commit a mistake. Now, you may ask me why. Because the theme of creativity, what I mean to say is that a poet always wants to compose a poem. And sometimes a poet thinks that if I start to read the works of some other writers, if I start to read the works of some other masters, I will be able to successfully compose a poem. But this is what, according to Sir Philip Sidney, is a wrong step. A poet cannot compose a poem just imitating the works of some other writers. A poet has to understand that creativity is a spontaneous as well as a continuous process. What William Wordsworth says in the preface to Lyrical Ballads, that poetry is the spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings. So poetry is something that is not enforced. Poetry is something that is not the outcome of intellectual labor. You may be meritorious, you may be a bibliophile, you love to read many books, but whenever you want to compose a poem, you have to keep it in mind that you have to listen to your words, you have to feel your emotion. Only at that point of time you will be able to successfully compose a poem. So if you think that this poem is merely dealing with the theme of unrequited love or unfulfilled love, then we will commit a mistake. Now you may ask me why. Because I am telling you that here in this poem, Loving in Truth, it's sonnet number 1. There are 108 sonnets in this sonnet collection, and this is the opening sonnet, right? This is the opening sonnet, and this opening sonnet is very, very important. Why? Now I'm going to explain that one by one. Listen to me, please. The first point I'm telling you that here the poet, Sir Philip Sidney, or the poet lover, if you consider that here is a speaker who is the representative of Sir Philip Sidney, he's eager to express his romantic emotion for his lady love, and he thinks that if I can express my romantic emotion by the medium of poetry, and when my beloved will read my poem, she will be literally impressed by my poetry, and at least I can get pity and grace from my love. If I do not get love from my beloved at that point of time, I will be successfully get that pity and grace from my lady love. And that is why the lover has just taken an initiative. He believes that if he can compose a poem, his poem will be able to impress his beloved, and for the sake of it he just wants to compose a poem as quickly as possible. But whenever the poet wants to compose a poem, the poet faces that he's not able to write it down because he's not creative, because he is not getting the appropriate words for the sake of expressing his emotional ideas. And that is why the poet has taken an initiative. And what is that initiative? He thinks that if I start to read the works of some other writers, if I start to read the works of some celebrated writers and the masters, I will get many appropriate words, many creative words and ideas. And when I will express, when I will write down that creative words and ideas in my poem will be fantastic, and it will be able to impress my beloved. So this is what the poet wants, and that is why the poet has taken that initiative, that he will read many works, many many poems. But then the poet says that whenever he has started to read the works of some other writers and the other masters, the poet feels that no, he cannot compose a poem. After all, the poet feels that these are not his words, these are the words of some other writers, and these words cannot perfectly express his own innate feeling. These words are not able to express his own feelings. So for the sake of expressing his own feelings, what he badly needs is his own ideas, is his own words, is his own emotional expressions, right? And the poems of some other writers are not going to do justice to express his own feelings. And that is why at the end of this poem, if you can ask me, sir, where is the volta in this particular sonnet? You all know that an Italian sonnet, or a sonnet in general, it has first 8 lines which are technically called octave, and the last 6 lines which are technically called sestet. And we generally consider that there is a turn of thought between octave and sestet, and that is technically called to be volta. But in this poem, volta is found in the last line of the poem. In the last line of the poem, we understand that there is a reference of the goddess of poetry. A muse comes, and the muse has started to tell that, oh, the poet, oh, the lover, you are just following a wrong way. This is not how you can compose a poem. If you want to compose a poem, you have to follow a right kind of procedure, and the right kind of procedure is to look at your heart, is to study your feelings, and therefore you must try to compose a poem. This is what the muse has given that piece of advice to the poet at the end of the poem. And therefore we understand that a poet must have to be very much creative, have to be very much innovative, have to be very much original. Mere imitation can never produce great art. If somebody wants to imitate the works of some other writers, the creation or the writing, that is not going to be exceptional, that is not going to be extraordinary. So this poem is like a message. It's like a suggestion to the other writers that if you want to be a poet, if you want to be a creative personality, you must not follow the path of imitation. Instead, you have to listen to your heart, you have to listen to the language spoken by your emotion. If you can listen to that, only at that point of time you can become a successful poet, otherwise you cannot. Now you must not think that Sir Philip Sidney was lacking the creative ideas, right? That Sir Philip Sidney, he was such a great personality, he was such a great sonneteer, and now he's saying that I do not have sufficient words, or I didn't have sufficient words to express my feelings, sir. So, do you think that Sir Philip Sidney started to find out words, from the works of some other writers? Then we will equally commit a mistake. Actually, here the poet just wants to share a message, wants to share a poetic advice among all of us, poetic piece of advice among all of us, that if we want to become a poet, we have to be original. So this is what the poet gives this reference, the poet gives that example after introducing his own case. It's an imaginary case, believe me. It's not that he lacks words, it's not that he doesn't have that creative genius. He's a great personality, he's a great poetic genius, he's a great poetic talent. He has that words, he has that store of creative words. But here the poet just wants to give a piece of advice to all the other readers, to all the other writers, to all the creative personalities of this globe, that if you want to be a poet, what you need to do is to read the emotion, is to feel your emotion, and then try to express your emotion into the form of a poem. So this is what the piece of advice the poet here wants to give, right? So it's about originality, it's about creativity. Although outwardly the poem deals with the theme of unrequited love, the unfulfilled kind of love relationship, it is known to everybody. Now, without any further delay, let's start to explain the poem. Look, the first line, it opens with this particular expression, loving in truth. Here, loving in truth, this particular expression means the deep and genuine love, right? The deep and the genuine love of the poet for his lady love or for his mistress, right? Now, you know the name Penelope Divarux. Penelope Divarux. So, at the beginning of the poem, the poet says that my love for my lady is deep, my love for my lady is genuine, it is sincere, it is honest, it is truthful, and that is why the poem begins with this particular expression, loving in truth. Clear? And then the poet says that fain, here fain means gladly. In verse means by the medium of poetry. In verse means by the medium of poetry. A verse is a poem that follows the meter and the rhyme scheme. Now listen to me. Now loving in truth, that means the deep and genuine love. The deep and genuine love of the poet, the deep and genuine love of the poet for his mistress. And the poet says that very gladly, I want to show my love by the medium of poetry. I want to show. I want to show means I want to express. I want to express what? I want to express my love. My love for whom? My love for my beloved, my love for my mistress, my love for my beloved, my love for my mistress, Penelope Divarux. Take ache. I just want to express my love for her by the medium of poetry. Now, this line is very much significant. So the poet wants to do what? Since the poet is in deep love with his beloved, and that is why the poet wants to express his deep love for his beloved by the medium of poetry. Now, it's an important question. Why does the poet want to express his love by the medium of poetry? Why does the poet want to express his love by the medium of poetry? We need to understand that. We need to know the reason. We all know that poetry is the another name of magic, right? Poetry is not always the outcome of logical synthesis. It's magic. It's the result of imagination. And poetry can impress a reader more than a prose can ever impress a reader. So the impressive quality of a poem is greater than the impressive quality of a prose or any other literary genre. Am I right or wrong? So the poet here wants to express his love by the medium of poetry only because the poet feels that his poem will be able to create more impression on his beloved than any other literary genre, right? Now, here I just want to speak about another factor for expressing love by the medium of poetry, and that is the 16th century tradition. What I say? That is the 16th century tradition. Here, tradition refers to the tradition of expressing love by the medium of poetry. In those days, the writers, the sonneteers in large numbers, in those days, the writers or the sonneteers in large number, they always express, you know what? They always express their love by the medium of poetry. So the poet is just doing the same thing. He is not doing an exceptional thing. He is just following the tradition. And what is the tradition? He is expressing his love by the medium of poetry. So what is the meaning of the first line? In the first line, the poet says that his love for his beloved is extremely deep, it's genuine, it's sincere, it's honest, it's truthful. And he just wants to express his truthful love for his beloved by the medium of poetry. And why does the poet want to express his love by the medium of poetry? Now here goes two answers. The first one is that poetry is more impressive than any other literary genre, and that is why the poet believes that if he can express his love by the medium of poetry, his poem will be able to create more impression on his beloved than any other literary genre. And he is also equally following, the tradition that has been set by the other 16th century writers, the other 16th century sonneteers. Okay, now let's go to the second line. Now, so that C means his lady love, C means his beloved. Now you can see the repetition of the word C. The repetition of the word C, it intensifies the poet's deep love for his beloved. The repetition of the word C, it could be an important question. Why is the word C repeated twice? And here goes my answer. Here goes my explanation. The word C is repeated twice only to indicate the poet's deep love for his beloved. So the poet is in deep love. The poet has a kind of a genuine love, and that is why the poet decides to repeat the word C twice. Okay. So that C, my dear C, that means my dear beloved. My dear beloved Penelope. So that C, my dear beloved Penelope, she might take some pleasure of my pain. And now we are going to explain these two words. First one is pleasure and the next one is pain. Now we need to understand that who is going to get this pleasure. The answer is already known to everybody, that the beloved Penelope Divrux is going to get the pleasure. What kind of pleasure is this? This pleasure is, boys and girls, this pleasure is the intellectual pleasure. This pleasure is the intellectual pleasure. Now you may ask me, sir, what is this intellectual pleasure? Actually, intellectual pleasure simply refers to a kind of a pleasure that a person gets after completing a poem. Whenever, suppose you have started to read a poem, you are able to get the meaning of the poem, you understand the theme of the poem, you understand the significance and the symbolism used in the poem. Believe me, after completing the poem, you will get a kind of an intellectual pleasure inside your mind. This pleasure is different. It's not physical pleasure. It's not physical pleasure. It's purely intellectual pleasure. It's purely meritorious pleasure. It's the pleasure of the mind. It's the pleasure of the intellect. Okay. So who is going to get that pleasure? The beloved is going to get that pleasure. When is the beloved going to get that pleasure? The beloved will get that pleasure once he will complete, the act of reading the poem wrote by the lover. Right. So my beloved Penelope Divrux, she will get some pleasure. And she will get some pleasure after reading what? After reading my pain. Now we need to understand, why is this word pain introduced in this particular line. And now here I am going to tell you two reasons. The first one is the painful life of the poet, the painful life of the lover. The poet will definitely write about his painful condition in his poem, because the poet is separated from his beloved. So his poem will definitely speak about that unfulfilled relationship, right? So the reason of the pain is that the lover and the beloved, both of them, are separated from each other. The lover and the beloved are separated from each other, and that is one of the reasons behind the creation of the pain. It is known to everybody. So the word pain, it means the painful condition of the life of the lover, or the painful life of the lover. And this pain, the poet will write in his poem, and the beloved will come across about it once the beloved will complete reading, the poem of Sir Philip Sidney, right? And the second point that I'm going to speak about, that is also and equally important, you know, the act of composing poem is not everyone's cup of tea, right? Act of composing a poem is not a cakewalk that you take a piece of paper, you take a pen, you just sit on the chair and then you just start to write it down and you will complete it within a minute, within some seconds. No, you cannot do that. You have to spend, day after day, you have to spend hour after hour, right? And still you will be unsure about the outcome, because the creation of a poem, as I'm telling you, it's like the blissful journey, it's like a very attentive journey. Here the result is very much uncertain, but you have to spend many hours, right? So the second explanation or the second interpretation of the word pain is that the act of composing a poem, the act of composing a poem is a painful task. The act of composing a poem is a painful task. Am I clear to everybody? So the poet will speak about that pain in his poem. So the poet will speak about that pain in his poem. And what kind of pain? The painful life of the lover. Right. What kind of pain? His creative pain, his intellectual pain that the poet will express in his poem. Right. And when the beloved will read that, the beloved will be able to receive a kind of an intellectual pleasure. So what is the meaning of the second line? In the first line, the poet says that since I am in deep love with my beloved and I believe that I must express my love by the medium of poetry, and that's how I will follow the tradition that has been set by the 16th century writers and the sonneteers in general. In the second line, the poet says that when I will write my painful life, when I will write my miserable condition in my poem, and when my beloved will start to read my poem, my beloved will get some idea about my life, and when she will get that idea about my life, right? When she will get that idea about my painful condition, and I believe that she will get pleasure. She will get pleasure. A pleasure that doesn't mean that my beloved will start to become extremely happy after knowing my painful life. No, not that. Not that. The poet here speaks about the kind of intellectual pleasure that a reader gets after completing a particular poem, right? Now, pleasure might cause her read, reading might make her know. Pleasure. Who will get that pleasure? Who will get that pleasure? The beloved will get that pleasure. So the beloved will get that pleasure, the intellectual pleasure. I repeat, here pleasure refers to the intellectual pleasure. Pleasure might cause her read. So pleasure will compel her. Pleasure will compel her. Pleasure will force her, or pleasure is the reason behind her reading. Behind her reading. Reading of what? Reading the poem of the poet. So it's because she is getting the pleasure, that's why she will read my poem. And the more she will read my poem, the more she will come to know about my condition, right? So it's like a mathematical calculation. The more she will read, the more she will come to know about my painful condition. And she will not read my poem if she did not get that pleasure. So it's because she is getting that pleasure, she will read my poem, and the more she will read my poem, the more she will come to know about my painful condition. Am I right or wrong? So pleasure is the reason behind her reading. Say, pleasure might cause. We can write it down in this same, in a very simple way, that intellectual pleasure is the main reason behind her reading. So she is reading my poem, it's because she is getting that intellectual pleasure. And the more she is reading my poem, listen to me, and the more she is reading my poem, the more she is going to know about my life, about my condition, right? So reading might make her know. That means she's going to know about she's going to know a lot about my miserable life. She's going to know a lot about my painful condition only because she has started to read my poem. Okay. And knowledge might pity win. Now, you need to read this line this way. Knowledge might win pity. Knowledge might win pity. Knowledge might obtain grace. Right. Knowledge might win pity, knowledge might obtain grace. Here obtain means achieve. Obtain means achieve. Okay. So knowledge might win pity. Whose knowledge? Whose knowledge? The knowledge of my lady love. The knowledge of my lady love. It simply refers to Penelope's knowledge. Penelope's knowledge about what? Penelope's knowledge about the, what I say, Penelope's knowledge about the condition of the lover, right? So, when she will get that knowledge, she will feel what? She will feel pity for the lover. She will feel pity for the lover. Am I clear to everybody? She will feel pity for the lover. When she gets that knowledge, she will feel what? She will feel pity for the lover. Okay. And the lover believes that I will win two sentiments. He will win two sentiments. One is the pity that the beloved feels for him. It is something that the lover will be able to win. And another is grace. Grace is something that the lover expects that he will be able to obtain from the beloved. Now, these two words are not at all the applicable words so for the case of a love relationship is concerned, because grace is something that is generally shown by a goddess to a devotee. Suppose a devotee has started to worship a god or a goddess or a deity for a long time, and the worshipper or the devotee had sacrificed many things in his life, and then finally the god or the goddess has felt that grace for the devotee. At that point of time, the word grace is mainly used, or at that point of time the word grace should be used. So this is the significance of the word grace. But now the poet here means to say that I'm not going to win love from my beloved. The poet has probably, the poet has probably come to understand, he's like a fatalist. He probably comes to understand his destiny. He understands that my beloved is married to Lord Rich, so there is no probability if I could ever get, love from my beloved. So I'm not going to get that love from my beloved. I'm going to get what? I'm going to get either pity or grace. I'm going to get what? Either pity or grace. These are the two sentiments which the lover believes that he could get, from his beloved, right? These two words, pity and grace, are not at all applicable so for the case of a balanced emotional love relationship, is concerned. Now, I have to explain the significance of the word knowledge also. Now, if we can look to Sir Philip Sidney's critical prose work Apology for Poetry, we have to understand, or we have to know that Stephen Gosson, the Puritan critic, in his critical book School of Abuse, he has started to bring allegations against the poet, and he says that the poets, they are the regions behind the waste of time, and poetry is full of lies. Poetry is the waste of time, and the message or the poetic ideas shared by the poets in general are not at all applicable, are not at all welcoming, because whatever the poet shares, the poet shares the bad ideas. The poet shares a kind of, unacceptable ideas. The poet shares a kind of very worse pieces of advice. But in this particular line, Sir Philip Sidney says that no, poetry is the source of knowledge. Poetry is the source of knowledge. This is like a reply to Stephen Gosson's School of Abuse. Sir Philip Sidney wrote Apology for Poetry, and in Apology for Poetry, Sir Philip Sidney says that poetry is the source of knowledge. And in this particular line also we understand that poetry is the source of knowledge. If somebody starts to read a poem, a person will be learned. A person will come to know a lot. So knowledge is definitely the outcome of poetry. So knowledge is the result of reading a poem. And that is why the poet says that it is knowledge, it is knowledge that will make, it is knowledge that will make my beloved to feel pity and grace for me. I have told you, in a balanced emotional relationship, these two words, pity and grace, are not applicable, but still the poet has been speaking about that because the poet knows his condition. He understands that he is not going to get love from his beloved. What he can get from his beloved, what he can get from his beloved. Option A, pity. Option B, grace. Option A, pity. Option B, grace. Right? So I might win pity. I might win pity. So pity. Pity means sympathy. Right? Pity means sympathy. So is there any chance? Can I get love from my beloved? No. Can I get love from my beloved? No. Then I can get what from my beloved? I can win what from my beloved? I can win pity from my beloved, right? Can I obtain love from my beloved? No. Then he can obtain, that means he can achieve only grace, the blessings, right? He can get what? He can get grace, that means blessings. What a devotee achieves, what a devotee obtains, from a god or from a goddess or from a deity. So these two lines are extremely meaningful. Here the poet says that the more my beloved will get pleasure after reading my poem, the more she will come to know about my condition, and the more she will come to know about my condition, the more I will obtain both pity and grace from my beloved. No, I will not obtain love from my beloved. There is no probability of that. I will obtain only pity and grace from my beloved. Let's let's start to read the next line. The poet, the lover, the poet or the lover. He sought. He sought means he searched. He searched what? He searched fit words. Fit word means appropriate words. Right? To paint. To paint means to describe. The blackest face of O. It means he says that his face has become blackest. It's not black, it's blackest. The worst form of black. His face has become blackest after being burnt by, O. It means sadness. It means misery. So here O, that means sadness. It means misery. It's like a fire. Say, here O, which means sadness, which means misery, it's like a fire. And this fire has made the face of the poet blackest. Say, O or sadness or misery, it's like a fire. And this fire has made the face of the speaker blackest. And the poet wants to do what? The poet wants to paint. Here paint means he wants to describe. He wants to write a poem. He wants to write a poem in which he will describe his blackest face. His face has become blackest because his face is burnt completely by the fire of O, by the fire of sadness, by the fire of misery. So his life has become miserable. Now, you may ask me that why his face has been described as blackest. The reason is that the poet is separated from his beloved, and the poet feels that he is emotionally lost, and that is why the poet says that my face is the blackest one. It's like, it is burnt by the fire of misery. And the poet wants to describe such a black face. The poet wants to describe such a black face, such a burnt face, obviously with the help of appropriate words. So the main point is that I need appropriate words. If I don't get appropriate words, I cannot properly express my blackest face. So I will express my blackest face only if I could get fit words. That means if I could get appropriate words only at that point of time I will be able to express the blackest face, right? And for the sake of describing my miserable condition, for the sake of painting the image of the blackest face with the help of the words in my poem, a poet is like a painter. A painter, paints something with the help of brush and color. A poet also paints, but not with a brush, not with the help of the colors, but with the help of the words. So the poet is equally painting. So here painting means the poet is equally writing, but he is not painting with the help of colors. He is not painting with the help of a brush and a canvas. He is painting that. That means he is describing that with the help of the words, with the help of the poetic expressions, right? So the poet sought, that means the poet searched. What did the poet search? The poet searched the fit words. Here fit word means the appropriate words. Why did the poet search the appropriate words? The poet searched the appropriate words because the poet wants to describe. What does the poet want to describe? He wants to describe the saddest face. He wants to describe the blackest face. He wants to describe his miserable face, the disappointed face, right? So for the sake of describing the blackest face, the poet has started to study. The poet has, started to do what? The poet has started to study. That's a wrong strategy. If you are a creative genius, you must not study. But that is what the poet is telling us, only because the poet will just make us aware about philosophical truth, about universal truth at the end of the poem. And that is why the poet is here introducing a kind of a wrong initiative. So the poet has started to study. Study means the act of reading. The poet has started to do what? The poet has started to do the act of reading. The poet has started to study. What does the poet start to do? He has started to study. What is he studying? Excuse me. What is he studying? He has started to study inventions fine. I am requesting you to read this adjective first. Noun last. That means fine invention instead of invention fine. Now invention fine, it means the creative works of some other writers. The creative works of some other writers. The creative works of some other poets, right? These poets are called inventions. These poems are called inventions because these are the inventions of some great creative writers like Petrarch, like Ronsard, like Dante. So the poet has started to do what? The poet has started to study. What has the poet started to study? He has started to study, he has started to read the creative works of some other writers, the creative works of some other poets. Why? The purpose of the poet was to entertain. Here to entertain means to offer delight. To offer delight. So this is another positive impact of poetry. So poetry is the storehouse of knowledge. Poetry offers and imparts knowledge, something we come across. And the second one is that poetry also entertains. Poetry also entertains, right? This is the second blessings. This is the second positive consequence of the act of reading poem, right? Now the poet says that I must have to study the creative works of some other writers because my beloved is witty. It's because his beloved is witty. She has wit. That means she is extremely smart. She is extremely witty. She is extremely talented. She is extremely educated. She is extremely learned. So it's because my beloved is witty. And I have to entertain the wit of my beloved. Listen to me. My beloved is witty. My beloved is smart. My beloved is educated. And my purpose is to entertain the wit of my beloved, and that is why I have taken an initiative. And what is that initiative? I have started to study, I have started to read the works of some other masters, the works of some other writers. Yes or no? So the poet has taken a kind of a wrong strategy. And what is that wrong strategy? The poet has started to study the works of some other writers for the sake of entertaining the wit of his beloved, right? Now let's go to the next line. Oft, it means often. It means very frequently. It means very frequently. Very frequently, the poet has started to turn. The poet has started to turn. Here, turn means to turn over. To turn over the leaves of the poems, right? Suppose the poet is having a book and the poet is turning over the leaves. The poet is turning over the leaves of the books. So the poet is doing what? The poet is turning over. The poet is doing what? The poet is turning over the leaves of the poems or the leaves of the books of some other writers, of some other great personalities. So others' leaves, here others' leaves means the leaves of the books, the leaves of the books of some great writers, the leaves of some books of some, the leaves of the books of some great writers. So the poet has started to turn over the leaves of the books of some other writers. Why? Why has the poet started to turn over the leaves of the other writers? Why has the poet started to turn over the leaves of the other writers? Because the poet wants to see if thence, that thence means from there. Here thence means from there. From there means from where? From the books. From the books which the poet was turning over. The poet was turning over those books. Why? Because the poet wanted to get some appropriate words, ideas and expressions. And these words, ideas, expressions that the poet wanted to implement in his creative poem, by which the poet believes that I will be able to impress my beloved. Yes or no? So the poet has started to do one thing. And what is that initiative taken by the poet? The poet has started to turn over the leaves of the books of some great writers, and the purpose of the poet behind turning over the pages of the books of some other writers to find out some appropriate and meaningful ideas and expressions. These meaningful ideas and expressions, these creative ideas and expressions, the poet believes that he will be able to write it down in his own poem, and therefore he will be able to create a kind of an a kind of a delight, a kind of an entertainment on his beloved's mind, right? So the poet wants to see that if thence would flow, if thence would flow. So from that books or from the pages of that books, the poet believes that there will be the rain of. Here flow refers to the rain of inspiration. Here flow refers to the rain of inspiration. Here flow refers to the rain of creative ideas. So the poet expects that it's because I am reading the works of some other writers. So whenever I will complete reading the works of some other writers, I will get that rain of ideas, the rain of inspiration, the rain of creative potential, right? And this particular metaphor is important. You all know that metaphor is a figure of speech in which a kind of an implicit comparison is drawn between two dissimilar ideas. Now, you need to understand that the poet says that my brain is sunburned. So, sunburned brain, it brings to our mind the image of sunburned land. Sunburned land. You know that during the time of summer, because of the presence of the scorching heat of the sun, how the surface of the earth is cracked, how the surface of the earth is dry, how it becomes barren and unproductive. Am I right or wrong? The surface of the earth, it becomes barren, it becomes dry, it becomes unproductive, it becomes infertile. Why? Because of the excessive heat of the sun, and the excessive heat of the sun had just scorched, the surface of the earth. Am I clear to you? Now, you know that a scorched piece of land is unproductive. A scorched piece of land is unproductive. A single sapling that cannot be grown, a single plant, a single sapling that cannot be grown on the surface of a dry piece of land, right? So, if you want the growth of the plants and the vegetation, what you need to do is to find out the surface of the earth which is extremely wet, which is like a wet land, which is full of water, which is very much fertile, which is very much, productive. So the poet says that my brain is sunburned. Now you may ask me, sir, why does the poet say that his brain is sunburned? The poet says that his brain is sunburned because he also lacks the poetic ideas. He doesn't have that poetic inspiration. He is not getting the inspiring words. He falls short of, the creative words. So it's because he doesn't have that creative words. That's why he says that my brain is sunburned. Right. Now, the poet is expecting sour. The poet is expecting sour. Sour. This word sour is extremely symbolic here. Here, sour means the rain of creativity. Here, sour means the rain of words. Here, sour means the rain of ideas. Here, sour means the rain of, the rain of poetic words and expressions. Right? So, the poet believes that he can get that rain of words and poetic ideas. He can get that rain of words and poetic expressions only when he will read the works of some other masters. He will complete the act of reading the works of some other writers and other genius personalities. And he believes that he can get that rain of inspiration, the rain of creativity. So this rain is called fresh, it is called refreshing. It is called refreshing and it is called fruitful. Fruitful means productive. It is called refreshing, it is called productive because a torrential rain is always refreshing. A torrential rain is always productive. So the poet believes that his brain is sunburned, his brain is not creative at all, and there is a hope, there is robust optimism. The poet believes that if he completes the act of reading the works from some other writers, he can get some ideas and inspiring words, and that the poet believes that he will be able to write down, and therefore his brain that is now sunburned, it will become productive, it will become fertile. So just as the drops of rain can make a sunburned brain productive, just as the drops of rain can make a sunburned land productive. What I say? Just as the drops of rain can make a sunburned land productive, in the same way, the poet believes that the words and the ideas taken from the works of some other writers, are equally capable of making his brain inspiring. So just as the sunburned land that becomes productive only by the touch of fruitful sour, only by the touch of fresh torrential rain, in the same way the poet believes that his brain is equally uncreative, it is also unproductive, since he is not capable of composing a poem. But the poet believes that if he can complete the act of reading the works of some other writers, and from there he can get some inspiring words and ideas, he will be also, he will be equally successful. He will be equally successfully compose, or he will be able to successfully compose a fantastic poem, right? But the problem is that, one second. But the problem is that the poet is facing a kind of a problem. And what is the problem? The words came halting forth. That means words do not come spontaneously. Words do not come spontaneously. After all, the poet was following a wrong strategy. That was not a right kind of strategy. So the words came halting forth. That means words do not come spontaneously. The words lack. What? The touch of invention. Here invention means creativity. Invention means originality. Am I clear to everybody? The words lack the touch of invention, the words lack the touch of creativity or originality. Wanting means lacking. Invention means creativity, originality. So these words which are copied from the works of some other writers, these words do not come spontaneously. These words lack the stay of invention, lack the touch of invention, lack the touch of creativity, lack the touch of originality. Am I clear or not? After all, these are not the words of the poet. These are the words of the other writers. Right or wrong? Now, this line is extremely important. The poet says that invention is the child of nature. So we can call, if invention is the child of nature, we can call nature is the mother of invention. Right? Nature is the mother of invention. Now, what is meant by the word invention? Invention means creativity. Invention means originality. It simply refers to a kind of intuitiveness. So invention means what? Invention means creativity. Invention means originality. And invention is called the child of nature. So alternatively, nature is the mother of invention. Right. Now, forget for some second this particular phrase from this line. We will come to this phrase later. But now, let's read this line in this way. Invention fled. Fled. It means to escape. Right? So, invention did what? Invention fled. Invention escaped. Invention went away. Invention went away. Went away from where? Went away from the blows of study. From the blows of study. That means from the attack of study. So, if you start to read a lot, you can get many words, ideas and expressions. But what you cannot get is invention. What you cannot get is originality. Yes or no? Now, study is compared to stepdam. Stepdam means stepmother. Try to understand. Study is compared to what? Study is compared to stepdam. Stepdam means stepmother. Now, you have to understand the relationship between invention and nature is the relationship between a son and a mother. But the relationship between invention and study is the relationship between a son and a stepmother. Stepdam means a stepmother. We know that a son always wants to go away from a stepmother because a stepmother always tries to, is not so much loving. Generally, in general cases, we understand that a stepmother is not so much loving, not so much caring. She is not at all so much careful, to a child. She is harsh. She is harsh. She is merciless to a child. And a mother's love is something we don't have words, to describe. Now, the poet here means to say that since I was reading the works of some other writers for the sake of finding out words and expressions, I can reach to the conclusion that I was not getting that words and expressions. I was not getting that words and expressions. I was trying to get that words and expressions, but I was not getting that words and expressions. Because invention is something that comes naturally. So invention is called the child of nature because invention is the blessings of nature. Invention is the gift of nature. Invention is something that cannot be endowed by the forceful act of studying. If you study a lot, you can come to know a lot. You probably will become learned. You will become informative. You will have many ideas. You will be like an encyclopedia. But the problem is that your act of continuous reading may not always make you creative. The creative talent, the creative potential is completely a different thing. It's the gift of nature. And that is why invention is called the child of nature. So nature is the mother of invention. So creativity is the blessings of nature. So nature is the mother, invention is the nature is the mother, invention is the son, and study is the stepmother. It's like a pure metaphor, taken from a family where we see that the relationship between a son and a stepmother is not going to be very much healthy. There are bickerings, there are disharmony, there are multiple differences between their relationships, and a child always wants to go far away from a stepmother because a stepmother doesn't deal, lovingly with a child. A stepmother is harsh. A stepmother is merciless. Yes or no? Now, let's start to read the next line. Others' feet. This particular expression also holds double meaning. The first one is the path followed by the other writers. The path followed by the other writers, the first meaning. And the second is the prosodiac feet. The prosodiac feet. Here feet refers to the prosodiac feet. Prosody. Right. The word prosodiac, it comes from the word prosody. So others' feet, that means the path followed by the other writers. The path followed by the other writers, or the prosodiac feet employed by the other poets. By the other poets. So what is meant by this particular expression, others' feet? On the one hand, it means the path. Here path refers to the tradition followed by the other writers, or the prosodiac feet employed by the other poets. It seemed stranger. Here but means only. Seemed but stranger. That means it was unknown to me. It was unknown to me. In my way. My way means my way of writing. My way of writing. So whenever the poet goes to write something, the poet feels that the others' path, that means the path followed by the other writers, or the prosodiac feet, employed by the other poets, are extremely unknown. The poet feels that these are the paths in which I cannot walk, or these are the prosodiac feet that I cannot employ, because everybody has his own style. You cannot imitate the style of other, right? Virat Kohli plays cricket in his way. Sachin Tendulkar used to play cricket in his way. Everybody is unique. Everybody is extraordinary. So if you go to imitate somebody else, that will be a kind of an injustice to your talent. Follow what your heart says. Follow the creative potential instead of imitating others. And if you go to imitate others, you feel that no, that's not the right kind of thing you have done in your life. That's probably the wrong thing, right? And that is why the poet says that others' spirit, that means the path that was followed by the other writers, it was unknown. So for the case of his way of writing is concerned, the path followed by the other writers was unknown. So for the case of his way of expression, or so for the case of his way of composing a poem is concerned, the prosodiac feet that was employed by the other poets, that prosodiac feet was equally unknown to the poet, right? And the poet says that the feet, that means the path followed by the other writers, or the prosodiac feet employed by the other poets, he felt himself alien in that path. He felt himself alien in that path, right? And then in this particular line, the poet here introduces a brilliant imagery, a brilliant poetic image. He says that I was great with child. Here great means pregnant with. Here great with means pregnant with. Here great with means filled with. I was filled with a child, and whenever the poet introduces the reference of a child, we need to understand the image of a pregnant mother, boys and girls. A pregnant mother, she is filled with what? She is filled with a child. And she wants to do what? She wants to do what? She wants to deliver her child. She wants to deliver her child as early as possible. Right? She suffers helplessly. She suffers helplessly. And she is having and she is experiencing the throes. Here throes means the labor pain. Throes means the labor pain. The pain, that is experienced by a mother during the time of delivering a child. So what is meant by throes? Throes means the labor pain. A mother faces that during the time of giving birth to a child. And a mother suffers helplessly. A mother suffers helplessly. The mother wants to give birth to a child, but a mother suffers helplessly. Actually, the poet here wants to mean that just as a mother is pregnant with a child, so also the poet is filled with creative words, the poet is filled with many ideas. The poet is also filled with many ideas, the poet is also filled with many expressions. After all, the poet has read a lot, and therefore the poet comes to know a lot of words, a lot of expressions, and the poet equally wants to give birth to a poem, right? Just as a mother wants to give birth to a child, just as a mother wants to give birth to a child, so also the poet wants to give birth to a poem. But just as the mother suffers selflessly, so also the poet suffers selflessly. The mother cannot give birth to a child, the poet cannot give birth to a poem. And that is why the helpless suffering of a mother, the helpless suffering of a mother, that appropriately describes the helpless condition of the poet, because the poet has read a lot, the poet has come to know a lot about multiple words and expressions, but the problem is that, so I just want to speak, that means I just want to write. I'm great with child, that means I'm great with ideas, I'm great with expressions, and I also want to speak, I also want to write, but the problem is that I cannot write, and I'm suffering helplessly. I'm suffering helplessly. Right. Now, the poet has started to do what? The poet has started to bite my truant pain. I mean, the poet has started to bite his truant pain. Now, this particular expression is very, very important. Truant pain, it means disobedient pain. It means disobedient pain. Am I clear to everybody? Truant pain, it means what? It means disobedient pain. Now, the phrase truant pain, it also reminds us about the image of a disobedient boy. You know, who is a disobedient boy? A disobedient boy is one who always wants to go away from the meaningful words spoken by his guardians, from the meaningful words spoken by his well-wishers. So a truant boy is one who always, flees from, right? A truant boy is one who always flees from the words spoken by the well-wishers, right? In the same way, the poet says that my pain is truant. That means my pain is disobedient, because my pain is not going to listen to me. I'm just trying to write a poem, but despite my ultimate effort, I'm extremely unsuccessful in the act of composing my poem. So I can call that my pain is truant, right? And now the poet says that there is the presence of spite. Spite means anger. So I have just started to beat myself for spite. Now one thing, it is known to everybody. You are trying to do something, you are literally and repeatedly trying to do something, but despite the presence of your utmost effort, when you are experiencing failurity continuously, believe me, you may become angry. Believe me, you may become angry, right? So the poet has read a lot. The poet has studied a lot. The poet has almost finished the works of many writers. Many books the poet has completed, but the poet cannot compose a single poem. And that is why the poet says that my pain is truant, my pain is disobedient to me. My pain is not listening to my pain is not listening to my command. My pain is not listening to my instruction. I just want to compose a poem, but I am experiencing failurity continuously. So my pain is truant, my pain is disobedient. It is not obeying my command. It is not abiding my proposals, right? And I am becoming continuously angry because of the presence of the failurity. The last line. This last line, the most important line. Here, the muse. There are 9 muses in Greek mythology. There are 9 muses in Greek mythology. Greek mythology. You can go to Google, type the word muse. You will come to know about a lot, and we don't have the time to discuss here. Now, here muse refers to the goddess of poetry. Here muse refers to the goddess of poetry. The goddess of poetry calls the poet a fool because the poet because the poet foolishly behaves, because the poet behaves foolishly, or because the poet foolishly tries to compose a poem. It's not going to be the right way of composing a poem. If you want to compose a poem, you have to listen to the words of your heart. But the poet has started to do one thing, and what is that thing? The poet has started to read the works of some other masters, and that's why, or that's how the poet wants to compose a poem. That was the wrong step. That was a wrong strategy. And that is why the muse, or the goddess of poetry, now calls the poet that, oh, you are a foolish man. You have done a wrong thing. It was a wrong strategy. That's how a person can never successfully compose a poem. If you want to compose a poem successfully, you have to follow a different strategy, but you have followed a wrong strategy for a very long time. And that is why the muse is the goddess of poetry. And this muse has started to call the poet that, oh, you are a foolish man. You have behaved foolishly. You have just wrongly behaved. That was not the right kind of strategy a person should undertake. So my muse told me that, oh, you are a foolish man. Look in thy heart and write. This is the most important line. That means study your emotion. Study your emotion and then compose a poem. And then compose a poem. This is the main idea of the poem. That you have studied a lot about the works of some other writers. That was a wrong strategy. If you want to study your emotion, study your sentiment, study your feelings. Poetry is spontaneous and continuous process. It's not the outcome of reading a lot. It's not the outcome of studying a lot. If you want to be a successful poet, you have to do one thing. And what is that thing? You have to look to your heart. You have to study. You have to study your emotion. And then you must write a poem. So that is the last line of the poem. And that is the main idea of the poem. That mere imitation can never produce a great art. If somebody wants to become a great artist, one must have to be very much inventive and creative. Thank you.